Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Welcome to the I don't know what you call it, the season finale of the series on coexisting with AI tools. This final installment is called the Experiences and Reflections from Faculty in the Science, Technologies, Engineering, and Mathematics, the STEM disciplines as they are popularly known. So we have a lineup of 4 speakers today for you. Let me see if my slides will cooperate. Okay. Okay, so here's the plan. Each presenter will share for about 10 minutes, followed by about another 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll move on. Some housekeeping issues. This webinar is recorded. The recordings will be shared at this link, which my colleague Darshini will share in the chat. If you want to ask a question during the Q&A, please use the raise hand function that Zoom kindly offers. If you have any other comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat during the webinar. So here's the lineup of speakers. Pardon my crude PowerPoint skills. First up, we have Dr. Anders Gustavsson. Just to quickly introduce them, Anders is a senior lecturer at the School for Physical and Mathematical Sciences, and his topic today will be supporting conceptual learning and critical thinking with ChatGPT. Then second, we have Dr. Supraja, lecturer at the School of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, if I remember correctly. Her topic will be GAI, understanding, analyzing, and applying in an interdisciplinary context. Third, we have Dr. Vidya Sudarshan, lecturer at the School of Computer Science and Engineering. She will be speaking about the use of ChatGPT and impacts on undergraduates' problem solving in interdisciplinary learning. Finally, we have Assistant Professor Ong Yen Shiou, and hopefully her cat will be joining us. She's an assistant professor at the Natural Sciences and Science Education Academic Group at the National Institute of Education. She will share about learning to ask questions with ChatGPT in science education. So very exciting series of presentations. I'll stop talking now, pass the time over to Dr. Anders Gustavsson if there are no other questions. Without any further ado, Anders, please.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share my slides. Okay, hope you can see it. All right, I actually changed my title a little bit. I'm sorry about that. So as I worked on this, I realized that instead of talking about different things I've done and how brilliantly they've worked, which is not really true, and I more and more realized that there is another thing I wanted to talk about. So the title is Conceptual Learning, Critical Thinking, and ChatGPT. Slight change in title. Sorry about that. So, okay, here's the ChatGPT input prompt, all right? And I guess you might have noticed this little text below the input prompt. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information, which is good advice. I guess we tell our students to do that too. So that's it. Easy, right? But the question here is, are our students equipped with the skills they need to check this important information? And if they are not from the beginning, are we equipping them with these skills? All right. So that's what I wanted to talk about. So it's a slight change in topic. I hope you're okay with that. All right. So ChatGPT, okay, or by the way, so I'm going to talk about mathematics here mostly. My examples are from mathematics, but I think it's probably generalizable to other disciplines as well. My my examples, I'm going to show you a few examples. They are all done with GPT-4 with the Wolfram plugin, which makes it better at maths. All right. And if you do that, ChatGPT can be quite impressive. I'm often amazed at the output you can get. So, for example, this is a prompt. Mass is this, calculate a total mass given a density distribution over an area. And if we ask ChatGPT this little problem, we get a brilliant answer. It's correct statement of the problem, shows the calculations nicely, and gives us the correct answer. And I can even ask ChatGPT for the latex code for this to include in my slides. Very nice. Then sometimes ChatGPT is not so impressive. If we ask simple logic questions like this, suppose the following rule always holds. So this is the rule. If it is raining, then I carry an umbrella. So we know that this is always true. If it rains, then without fail, I'm going to carry an umbrella. It cannot happen that it rains and I don't carry an umbrella. Then suppose I am not carrying an umbrella. What conclusion can you make? All right. And I'm not trying to be funny here. This is not a trick question. What I hope is the obvious logical answer is that you can conclude that it is not raining, because if it was, then I would be carrying umbrella according to this rule. All right. And that's not what the ChatGPT answers. Okay, so this is the correct answer, or that it's not raining, because otherwise, by the given rule, I would be carrying an umbrella. But ChatGPT says that from this, we know that whenever it rains, you carry an umbrella. However, the reverse is not necessarily true. Not carrying an umbrella does not guarantee that it's not raining. It is possible that it's raining and you simply chosen not to carry an umbrella. So here it says that something is possible, which we clearly stated here is not possible, right? So logic isn't really ChatGPT's strong side. Okay, so that's fine with, I mean, that's why we have this little text here. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information. The problem with this is that our students, they are really good at this. All right. At least my students, they generally are very good at producing this kind of solutions. What they are not good at is this. All right. Logic, simple logic. Okay, now this example here might be a little bit extreme. I guess most people can get the correct answer here. But if you raise the abstraction level just a little bit, students will struggle. I will show you an example very soon. So my point here is that according to my experience, okay, loosely speaking, broad generalization here, but according to my limited experience here, ChatGPT and students are kind of similar. In particular, they both struggle with the logical reasoning and often make the same kind of mistakes. All right. Students often struggle with producing simple logical arguments. And because of this, they struggle with what we want them to do in this context, critically assessing the validity of an argument. All right. And I think one reason for this, a big contributing reason for this is that students often heavily favor procedural learning over conceptual learning and reasoning. In other words, they are good at they are good at this, but not this. All right. So then this whole thing fails if our students if our students cannot do better those things which ChatGPT can't do, then we have a problem. All right. Okay. So let me give you a more relevant, math relevant example. The previous example was a little bit silly, but let's return to this umbrella situation again. So we have the same rule. Suppose the following rule always holds. If it's raining, then I carry an umbrella. Same rule as before. But now we ask a different question. Suppose it is not raining. What conclusion can you make? All right. And in this situation, the correct answer is that we can't make any conclusion from this. The statement, the rule only tells us about what happens if it's raining. It doesn't tell us what happens if it's not raining. I can carry an umbrella, I cannot carry an umbrella. It doesn't matter. If it's not raining, I'm not breaking this rule. All right, let's switch to a mathematics statement. Something that if you study mathematics, you're familiar with it. Maybe you've forgotten it if you don't, but the chain rule, all right? The chain rule goes like this. If h of x is differentiable at the point C, and g of y is differentiable at h of c, and then we look at this composite function, g of h of x, then this function is going to be differentiable at x equal to c, and the derivative is given by the chain rule here, outer derivative times inner derivative. All right, hopefully familiar. But note what this rule does not say. It says, if this, then this. So if any of these things fail to hold, the chain rule doesn't give us any information. So for example, if this inner function h of x, if it's not differentiable at x equal to c, then this rule provides no information. We can't make any conclusion from that. Okay, sorry I'm tormenting you with a bit of maths here, but I'm going to stop very soon. Let f of x, here's a question, which I've asked my students in a quiz, all right? Let f of x be this function, sine cube of x to the power 1/3. What's the derivative at 0? The correct answer, if we fall back on the definition of derivative, we have to calculate the limit, and after a bit of calculation, we get an answer 1. If we plot the graph, basically the tangent to this curve has slope 1. The tangent at x equal to 0 has slope 1, so the derivative here is 1. However, a very common student mistake is the following. They look at the outer function here, sine cube, and the inner function, x to the power 1/3, and then they notice that the inner function, x to the power 1/3, is not differentiable at 0. All right, this one has a vertical slope at x equal to 0. There is no derivative at x equal to 0. And so they conclude that since this inner function is not differentiable, this whole thing is not differentiable. In other words, that they do what I said here that you cannot do. All right? If the inner function is not differentiable, we don't have any information from this statement. The conclusion, we can't make that conclusion. All right? And this answer is wrong, right? The definition here tells us that the derivative is 1. The graph clearly tells us, if we trust the graph, that there is a tangent that's not vertical. All right, and when I say that this is a common student mistake, I asked this in a quiz to the Yann scholars this semester, and the clear majority of them did that mistake. So the Yann scholars, that's the cream of the crop, are among our best students. All right. Okay, now let's ask ChatGPT. Same question. And you don't have to read the whole thing here if you don't want. Basically, ChatGPT does the same mistake as the students. All right. Also tells us that this function does not have a derivative at 0 because the inner function is not differentiable there. All right. So the conclusion here is that the way it is, our current students, if we ask them to check if the ChatGPT answers are correct or not, they are not really equipped to do that. All right. The common errors or misinformation that ChatGPT might produce are often things that our students also don't see. All right. Okay. So this was going to be a short 10-minute talk. I could talk about how to address this, but it's a difficult question, actually. But it's a difficult question that is not new. All right. Long before ChatGPT, we knew already that students heavily favor procedural learning over conceptual learning and mathematical reasoning. That's, I think, is why students give the wrong answer here, because they just try to apply the differentiation rules here. They try to apply the chain rule, although it does not apply in this situation. And when the chain rule fails, when the method fails, they conclude that there is no derivative, all right, rather than resorting to the conceptual, the definition of the derivative, all right. And because of this, I think students are currently ill-equipped to critically assess mathematical text, whether it's produced by ChatGPT or others. All right. And it's also, this is not just my opinions, by the way, there is education research that supports this, that the way mathematics is typically taught and assessed make this problem worse, because there are studies on calculus textbooks, for example, and what happens in a typical calculus textbook is some theory, and then there are worked examples, and then there are practice problems. And studies have shown that you can solve almost, typically in a typical calculus textbook, you can solve almost all practice problems by copying the method from the examples, from the worked examples. All right. In other words, you don't have to think about concepts. All right. So my take-home message here, the thing I wanted to say with this very short talk is that if we want our students to be able to critically assess output from an AI or from anybody, by the way, we need more than an ad hoc response. All right. I can add AI-specific intervention into my teaching if I want. I can introduce, for example, exercises in my course where we analyze answers provided by ChatGPT and whether they are correct or not. Practice critically assessing that. But unless if this is just if this is just on top of other learning material that focuses on procedural learning, such as most calculus textbook, then I think these interventions are not going to have much of an impact. These specific AI-specific interventions, I think they will only work if they are part of a larger strategy where we address the root problem, which is we are not actually training our students to be critical thinkers. All right. So I'm sorry that this was not really the topic I had announced in the title, but as I worked on these slides, this is kind of what I wanted to say. All right, that's it.
Thanks so much, Anders. That was very thought-provoking. And as someone who's lost a lot of mathematics ability since secondary school, I found some of that a little challenging, but I'll let others do the question asking. So does anyone have any questions? We have a few minutes for questions, about 5 minutes for questions. Anyone has any questions? You can leave them in the chat if you're so inclined.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat. All right. Good question. How would I incorporate exercises into my curriculum? Yeah, so I mean, for these exercises to work, I think you kind of have to lay the right foundation from the start. And the way I'm trying to lay the right foundation myself is by regularly have classroom exercises, graded classroom exercises. I use a TBL approach where I give students a mathematical statement and ask them if it's correct or not. All right, that's kind of how mathematicians work. Is this statement true? Prove, give a proof or a counterexample. So I'm trying to kind of emulate that mathematical process in the classroom. And whether you can use ChatGPT to, I mean, you could generate answers with ChatGPT and ask them if that, yeah, ask them to analyze that, which I have done, but in this context, I think AI or not is not really whether you use AI or not is not really the central question. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or maybe two quick ones. If there's any other questions.
Is there a way to implement a practice where the students would have to test the statement in a given situation and try out whether their solution would work or not? Not sure I understand the question. When you say try out, what do you mean? So, I mean, I can only speak from the mathematics point of view, and the way we test the way we either affirm the validity of a statement or disprove show that something is wrong is by proof or counterexample. All right. And producing either a proof or a counterexample might involve quite a bit of trial and error along the way. All right. Yeah, I think AI can help the students to make the critical assessment better, because if it rests on a proper foundation, right? So something I did this semester, I mean, I haven't done any proper follow-up with this, but which kind of turned out interesting was that we know that students like to use old exam papers for revision, which can or cannot, may or may not be a good thing. The potential problem with this is that many students approach all the final exam studies as pattern recognition exercise. Okay, I see this problem with these keywords, then I should apply this kind of solution that I have seen. I see this example problem, I apply this standard procedure. I see this example problem, I apply this standard procedure, right? So I did use AI as a way to circumvent that. So I gave them old exam papers, but for the most recent papers, which they are usually focused on, I just gave the ChatGPT answers, not my answers. Which means that they know that they cannot trust the answers. And that turned out quite interesting because some of the problems, which were of a more logical character, ChatGPT did a lot of errors and kind of big range of errors, like correct answer, incorrect reasoning, correct reasoning, but messing up the answer in the end, or just or sometimes perfect and sometimes rubbish. And but the point is that to be able to differ between the rubbish and the perfect answers, you actually have to understand the concepts. So yes, in that way, I think you can use AI to make the critical assessment better, but you kind of have to lay the foundation by practicing this first and do it consistently throughout the course, I think. All right. Yeah.
But I think that's all the time we have. Thanks so much, Anders. We are now going to move on to our second presenter. Thanks so much, Anders. I really appreciate the presentation and Q&A. Now let's hand the time over to Supraja. Do you want to share your slides?
Okay, so is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for coming for today's session. So for me, I have 3 slides. So I'm going to make it really short for 10 minutes. And my topic today will be generative AI in general. So it's not just focusing on ChatGPT, but any form of generative AI. And I'm going to look at it in 3 perspectives. So first will be understanding how it works, and then analyzing the pros and cons of generative AI. And finally, how generative AI can be applied in an interdisciplinary module, which is specifically the course that I'm teaching, which is CC 0007. So it's an ICC module. It's called Science and Technology for Humanity. Yeah, so I'm part of the core team of instructors. So I'm a lead instructor in this course. And I was involved since the beginning in terms of constructing the weekly activities, quizzes, everything that's basically like fully involved in from the scratch of this course. Yeah, so I'm actually from the School of EEE, and I'm mainly teaching ICC course for now. Okay, so let me start off with the first one, which is understanding. So my research area in my PhD was in NLP, which is natural language processing. So I kind of made use of some of my knowledge, as well as what I have learned over the past few years, especially when there's an emergence of generative AI. So in our course, we do have one of the modules which involves AI, so that we kind of educate the students on the foundations of what is AI, how does it work, what are the principles behind it, and then how is it actually helpful in businesses or in terms of a humanitarian perspective. Yeah, so in terms of the lecture content, it's mainly done by various faculties, and then I actually recorded one part of the lecture on generative AI, so that it is more relevant for students to appreciate appreciate the working principles behind what they are using in their everyday life. Yeah, so I just have some screenshots of the lecture slides that I went through. So I'll just walk you through what I have prepared for the lecture. So this is the first semester that we have rolled out this additional lecture as part of the students' learning content, so that, of course, they will be tested on it based on quizzes and so on. But more than the assessment, what they really need to know is they need to appreciate whatever that they are using in their everyday life. Yeah, so this is part of the technological or STEM aspect of AI, which our course is looking at. So I kind of give a very high-level overview of what is generative AI, because in our course, we give an introduction of what is discriminative methods, and then now I'm bringing in a new concept, which is generative methods. So I need to describe what are the differences between generative and discriminative. So, for example, discriminative could be things like classifying text or classifying images, whereas generative is something coming up with something that is new based on existing patterns that we can observe in data sets that we have. A very high-level overview for students to understand that generative AI is GPT text, but also involving things like images, audio, and video. And the examples that I've listed be, what are the various applications in which generative AI can be used for text, images, and audios as well. So, for example, for text, it will be things like chatbot. We have summarization. We have machine translation, like how we use Google Translate. So that's for like NLP. Whereas if you go to like computer vision or images, you have object detection. Making images with better super resolution. And also, for example, for video, generating animations for videos, text-to-speech conversion, and so on. So that students would be able to get a broader sense of where are the various areas in which generative AI can be used. And followed by which I just zoomed in specifically into ChatGPT by giving students a slightly deeper understanding on what are large language models. So I didn't really go into too much technical details, such as how is the architecture actually working, but for them to have an overview that a large language model is something that is beyond a normal machine learning model. You need a huge data set. And this whole concept is called an encoder and decoder. So I kind of gave an example with a translation, such that you give an English sentence and an encoder kind of takes in all the information. It does some kind of processing inside. And then the decoder does the reverse operation, which means that the output will be another language. So, for example, French. And this whole architecture is based on this thing called transformers. So it's important to have the right set of parameters to obtain the more accurate output. So this is how I generally explained it, because in the context of ICC, it is more of giving exposure to all students who come from all disciplines. So they could be students from humanities, arts, NIE, sports science. So it's not just STEM students, but even the non-STEM students should also be able to appreciate the technological working principles behind ChatGPT or even DALL-E or anything else that they are using in terms of generative AI. And in terms of applications, I did give application of translation and also chatbot, because chatbot is something that everyone is using like very casually for any kind of application or any website. There's always a chatbot. There's a prompt there. We can type in something, you'll give you the responses. So thinking beyond, what are just the applications, there are also some kind of like linguistic implications towards the use of ChatGPT. For example, what is exactly language, and how do these algorithms actually try to mimic what are humans trying to do? So how are machines trying to mimic human brain? Yeah, and then what are some of the basic concepts in terms of linguistics, such that is relevant for how ChatGPT or any large language model is able to follow the same style like what humans are doing. So in our course, we don't just look at the STEM aspect, but we also look at the soft part of it, which is the social science and humanities impact on whatever technologies that we're introducing. Yeah, so this kind of gives like a more holistic overview of generative AI as well as the impact of it. Yeah, so moving on, the second part will be on analyzing. So once students have roughly understood that, how is it actually working, then the next step will be how do they actually use it in terms of their in-class activities. So for every week, we have an activity and we call it a mission because our course is CC 0007, so it kind of mimics James Bond 007. So we have designed it in a very unique way that we call every week's activity a mission. So in every mission, the students they'll be given a task and they're supposed to solve it like detectives. So they're supposed to come up with, creative ideas, creative solutions to problems that they see around the world or even in Singapore, or it can be anywhere. So those relevant recent problems and how they can use technology to solve these problems. Yeah, and of course, what are the impacts as well. So one of the weeks, we had a discussion about generative AI across various industries. So we gave a mission to the students, like we split the students into 4 different categories, and they represent different organizations. So for example, if you look at Associated Press, that's more of journalism. Leo Burnett is for graphic design. And then you have delivery companies, warehouse workers, and so on. And then within every organization, the students have to be split into the role of a boss and worker. So they'll be looking at 2 sides of the coin. And their task is actually to see how generative AI or any kind of predictive analytics is having a positive or negative impact on these 2 types of stakeholders. So maybe it is more positive for the CEO, whereas for the employee's perspective, they might fear that, maybe generative AI is going to take over our jobs, it's going to result in unemployment. So for example, like for AP, right? Maybe ChatGPT could produce very good articles, so that it doesn't really need actual journalists there to write articles, maybe. And then for Leo Burnett, maybe the use of DALL-E can produce wonderful AI-generated images. So and then again, a graphic designer might feel that is kind of compromising their own career. So that could be a negative, but of course, there's still positives such that it will give more creativity in terms of images, in terms of designs. So that could assist a freelance graphic designer. And in the perspective of a CEO, is it cutting costs when they are using generative AI in their companies? Yeah, and then maybe another example would be for delivery riders. So if it kind of generates different routes for optimizing their delivery schedules, then that could benefit them. Yeah. So and similarly for the other organizations as well. So in class, we do have discussions, and the students have to come up with points. They have to come up with a poster or slides to highlight, the positives and negatives of generative AI. So essentially, after step 1, they learn how it works. Step 2, they are putting it into actual use, where they are standing in the shoes of these different organizations and different roles, and try to analyze, whether generative AI is actually, helpful or not, or whether it depends on how we are using it. Yeah, so that's about the analysis. And beyond what they do in class, of course, they do have written assignments, which we call proposals. So they have to identify a problem statement, and based on that, they have to come up with a solution and then discuss the STEM, business, and humanities impacts of their solution. So while they're doing so, we do have some kind of guiding points for them to follow. And generative AI discussion is also part of the proposal. So these are just some points that they should address when they look at the STEM, business, and HSS perspective. So for example, in the business perspective, are there any, are they going to use GANs, which is generative adversarial networks, or are they using generative AI in their solution? If yes, then how is it going to impact certain industries based on their solution? So some groups would do something like social media. Some might do environment, could be climate change, could be even forest fires. So there's a wide range of proposals that students come up with across different topics. It could be healthcare, it can be transport, it can be anything else. So if they are using generative AI as part of their solution, so maybe if they say that we are having a chatbot that generates something, or it generates whether something is fake or not. Yeah, or maybe they're looking at deep fake versus generative AI. So if they have some kind of comparison, compare and contrast, they have to explain clearly, why are they using generative AI, which type of generative AI, and how is it helpful, or does it have any detrimental effects on certain stakeholders? So that actually comes to the HSS part in terms of who are the various stakeholders and how does the solution impact them. Yeah, so this will be, summarizing the analyzing part of generative AI. And last but not least, it'll be the application of generative AI. So since we have proposals, we have students coming up with we have a final project, which is a poster design. So of course, they are free to use ChatGPT. Even in class, they do use ChatGPT. They even use DALL-E a lot, especially when they're trying to come up with their own version. Maybe they're coming up with a proposed robot, or they're coming up, I even had a group coming up with a bathtub for elderly, and they have different features, different buttons. So they used generative AI to come up with what they had imagined of, what kind of product or prototype they've imagined of. But even if they are free to use, of course they have to declare. So something that our course has introduced is that students have to complete a declaration form and say that to acknowledge whether they have used generative AI or not in their written assignments, their take-home assignments. So if they have not used, then they'll just tick the first box that they did not use. But if they used it for generating ideas or generating images, they have to tick the second box. Or if they just use it for English language correction, that's absolutely fine. They're free to use, but they have to tick the third box. And followed by ticking these boxes, they have to submit a digital paper trail, which means if, for example, if they are using ChatGPT, they have to indicate which is their input prompt, and then what is the output that they have obtained and how they have used their output, which means they can't directly lift off from the output. So for example, I had a group who came up with an image, an AI generated image. And then they asked me, like, what can we do with the image, right? So I told them they can't just copy and paste wholesale. So what they can do is they can gain inspiration from the image, but they have to do something to modify it based on their own original or creative, ideas. So maybe they can introduce some additional annotations or illustrations on top of that figure. They can use it as a baseline, and they do have to declare in the form as well that they have used it for generating key ideas. Yeah, so we have implemented this for the first semester, and we have seen that even if students have ticked second and third boxes, they have actually genuinely written, why they have used it, how they have used it. So they're kind of having a conscious effort of, they know why they need to use ChatGPT, not just for the sake of it. And of course, this is the first semester, so we are still looking at, how this is going to roll out in the next few semesters. Is this going to be something that is helpful for instructors, especially when we are grading? Yeah, so we can't just rely on the AI percentage that comes out from the Turnitin tool. So it may not be accurate. So of course, we also look at what students have declared, and based on our interactions with the students, we can kind of roughly gauge, how genuine and how true their submissions actually are. Yeah, so this is still work in progress, and we have just tried this for the first semester. But so far, this looks positive. Yeah, so hopefully this trend would continue for actually applying and acknowledging the use of generative AI in assignments or assessments. Yeah, so this is the last point that I have. And in terms of expanding more about generative AI, so in my own discipline, so what I have described so far will be how I'm teaching the ICC course, but back to my own home school, which is a school of EEE. In my own discipline, I'm actually proposing a new Master of Science course. So this is rolling out next semester. It's a new course, and the title of the course is Natural Language Processing. Yeah, and of course, I will be going through all the way from the technical details in terms of the traditional NLP, to the deep learning methods. And I also have a separate section just on emerging trends and what are the specific various different architectures of large language models. So I'm going more in depth into kind of, analyzing the various different architectures, various different models to kind of, spread this knowledge more, especially to the graduate students. Yeah, so they have much more experience since they have, completed their undergrad. Yeah, and it would be better if they could know the really, really intricate details of large language models. So that's my next step towards, exploring more on generative AI. Yeah, so with that, I am done with my presentation. Yeah, so I'm open for any questions.
Thanks so much, Supraja. Does anyone have any questions? I did not realize that the reason for the mission thing was the James Bond Association.
So our team actually came up with that idea together. So we are a team of four lecturers from different schools.
Yeah, that's great. Any questions? I'm looking in the chat.
Looking at the chat too.
Any questions? We'll wait maybe for another 30 seconds or so. If there's nothing, we will move on.
Sure. Oh, I think there's one question. Do you see students from different schools interact with generative AI differently? Okay, interesting question. Or what factors may influence their interactions? Okay. To answer, thanks for the question, right? To answer your question, actually, I have just started an edX project. So I'm trying to look at how STEM and non-STEM students learn differently when put together in an interdisciplinary setting. So the learning is not just in terms, one aspect will be in terms of assessments. So how they are using different tools or coming up with different novel ideas in terms of technologies. But another thing would be how the soft skills that they learn. So how do they actually learn from their counterparts? So maybe non-STEM students learn from the STEM counterparts on how do you actually use these different tools, or how do you string these different tools together? Yeah, so to answer your question, the outcome of my project would give the answer, but I'm predicting that there is currently a gap. So to answer your question, one word is yes. STEM students tend to interact with not just with generative AI, with any kind of technology in a more systematic manner, I think. Yeah, but non-STEM students still feel a bit lost. Yeah, so I'm trying to find out whether this gap exists, and if this gap exists, how can this gap be reduced through the findings in my project? Yeah, so that's for the first question. Yeah, so for the second question, how can we teach responsible use of generative AI? Responsible use. I think in the end, ultimately, is up to the students to declare. I'm assuming that you're asking about the declaration, which is the last point that I mentioned, right? To answer the declaration part, one way is for us to actually read, look through their submissions. So if we do have some kind of suspicion, instructors always have the rights to clarify with students. So for example, one of my experiences was that there was a group, and then it was like zero or a single digit percentage of AI generation. But when I read their proposal, it was it really looked a bit fake. Yeah, so it was like very point form, very segmented. It didn't have any natural use of words. Like it seemed too professional. Yeah, and then based on my interactions with the students, they don't seem to have actually written that proposal by themselves. Yeah, so that's one way. When we have conversation with a student, we kind of they know that if they cheat or if they do not properly declare, then they would face certain consequences. So maybe over time we would get to really fine-tune the process of the declaration of generative AI, responsible GAI, to benefit rather than harm society. Yeah, so in terms of how to teach, I think that is really still work in progress. Yeah, so I have one last question, right? If students acknowledge, how will a student not be considered as having plagiarized? Okay, so there's two kind of percentage, right? So one is the plagiarism percentage. So the plagiarism is when they really copy wholesale from any websites. But then if they're using ChatGPT, for example, there is no citation provided. So they can kind of just lift off directly. So if they have declared in the form, they have to provide a digital paper trail. So if they do not provide that, then that's kind of an area for penalizing them. But even before penalizing them, we need to know how they have actually used it. So the digital paper trail will show what is the output and how they have used the output. So we can compare the output with what they have actually written. So if it's exactly lifted off, then we have to manually compare and see that, yeah, that is definitely plagiarism, right? But if they have generated an output just for giving them some inspiration, some ideas, they could use certain points from that and then write it in their own words. So in that case, they wouldn't be plagiarized. Yeah, so it still involves something like human in the loop, right? It still involves like scrutiny by instructors. So which is why I mentioned that it's still work in progress, because we have just started this semester. Yeah, so it's something new.
All right, thanks so much, Supraja. I'm afraid we don't have any more time for questions for now. If anyone has any more questions, can leave it in the chat, and maybe if Supraja can hang around for a bit, she can respond to them in the chat. But if not, we really have to move on.
Sure.
Our next speaker, thanks so much, Supraja, appreciate it. Our next speaker is Vidya Sudarshan. So I won't waste any time. I'll pass the time over to her.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anders and Supraja. I think a lot of ChatGPT and GenAI was going on now. So today I'm going to talk about my experience where we implemented ChatGPT in one of the undergrad course, which is also ICC course, and which involves the student from the interdisciplinary background, and both in the STEM and the non-STEM. I think recently it is called Shiou. So I think everyone knows about the ChatGPT, no need introduction. And what is GenAI, I think Supraja mentioned now. So I'll directly jump into the context now. So we implemented this ChatGPT in one of the course, which is CC002, Navigating the Digital World. So we wanted to see how the ChatGPT can be used to create the 3-dimensional maze and solve the maze using the ChatGPT. So this is, I think, a screenshot of our tutorial you can see there. And this topic is, I think, we have 7 modules, and this is one of the last module actually. And the last module is emerging latest technology. And in that, we introduced this AI technology as a tutorial activity. And we try to meet all the learning outcomes in that. And we have instructions to students to use what kind of GPT. They have to download all those things. Instructions will be given to them. And the lesson overview, if you see, they have 2 activities to do. The first activity is nothing but they have to design a 3D maze. And in that part, it is actually designed in such a way that code design means they have to use the ChatGPT, but in some part of the tutorial activity, they can decide not to use also, and they can compare it later part. So this is the design, and we have the requirements set in place, like your maze design should be this much wide, all those things, the dimensions of the mazes, and some features. Your maze should have some trees, blocks or gems, river, bridge, etc. Then we try to impose that they have to prompt the ChatGPT telling that our maze should be challenging. And but later part, we observed that they made a challenging mazes, but they couldn't solve it later part. So that's why we reduced it. Okay, so make sure you are able to solve it before asking the ChatGPT. So then later part, the second activity comes as they have to solve the created maze. And that too, they have to ask the ChatGPT. And our intention, the main aim here is to show the student concept about the prompt engineering, like how to prompt and how much they have to change so that the ChatGPT answers for you, and some strength and weakness of this ChatGPT. And as Anders mentioned, like whether the students can evaluate the output of the ChatGPT, whether it is accurate or not, whether they can critically think themselves to tell what the ChatGPT has given the outcome, whether it is correct or not. That part we checked. So let me show you. So these are the some instructions we provide to the student while we in our tutorial material. These are the instructions. So a lot of instructions we will provide to the student, because since they are combining the ChatGPT and the 3D maze part. And if you observe, the GPT is only the 2-dimensional maze, but we need to convert it to 3-dimensional. So this 3-dimensional maze, we have a platform already, 3D maze. Okay, it is designed by one of the professor from our SESC. So we used that platform. And this is one examples we gave to the student. So like in your prompt, you need to give the starting point of the maze should be the mentioned as S, ending point as E, and the gems as G. If you want some monsters, you need to denote as M, and so and so. And the path can be like a 0 or 1 or maybe P. It's up to you. You need to mention your features, how it should be denoted. And then you need to mention the dimension, all those things. And if you see my right side there, after converting your maze, 3D maze into 2-dimensional grid, it looks like this. And this is one of the prompt we gave. And yes, from the experience, initially, when the student give, so this is the, when the student prompt this kind of questions, it gives you the 3D, 2-dimensional mazes, but we noticed in the classroom setting that, but when we put that 2-dimensional maze in the 3D platform and we try to solve it, it is not solvable. So that's the one limitations we found from the ChatGPT. But if we ask the ChatGPT gives you a lot of lengthy coding, and it gives you some 2-dimensional, the highlights the path also. It is this way you can go, but it is starting point and the ending point is not connected. So, and we asked the student to experiment with their prompt. So we provided them some examples also, like what can be done to ask the ChatGPT in a different way. And these are the some examples we gave them, like simple, like a simple prompt, like this is the task I need to achieve. Then you can give in terms of like exceptional kind of prompt, like a proper one, the with the grade, all those things. Then you can give like some tone kind. I want some adventurous kind of maze, all those things. But this process is going on. We encountered many variety, the responses from the students. Like for some students, directly like a 2-line prompt is working. Some student, how much they change the prompt, it is not working. And many variety we could see. And but if you observe, I think when we designed this the tutorial, we were not aware about the advanced version, but currently the advanced version can you can upload the image itself in the ChatGPT. So that's, I think, one group in our tutorial had that advanced version. I think the pay version. So they tried this the image, uploading the image of the maze, and they could get the clear the outcome from the ChatGPT. So, but when we give this coding, like the grid kind, the 2-dimensional one, and the prompt, so we encountered few issues, but a few could solve it. It depends, like, because we have a cohort of like 3,000 students. Out of 3,000 students, we have collected a lot of responses from the student, and we could see few favor the ChatGPT, few tell no, actually we did the work, the ChatGPT as an assisting tool. So that's a different kind of version we can see from the student. So if you observe, these are the 2 activities we had. One is they have to create a maze, and with some requirements we have. And some students cut, copy, paste this sentence, and they got the output. But when they went for solving, they couldn't solve the maze. So second activity is solving that maze. So these are the two activities, but they have to use a ChatGPT. So they can change the prompt as they want. And our question was for the student to like how they describe this interaction with the ChatGPT during their maze design task. And who contributed how much, whether you contributed, whether you felt you are the leading person, or whether the ChatGPT was the leading person. So that kind of thing we tested. So, and we asked the students those questions to answer. And what aspects of their interaction with the GPT today they enjoyed. And how was the interaction, whether they felt positive, negative, or mixed interaction. So all these things were asked for the students, and they were supposed to answer. And when they use the ChatGPT to create a maze and solve the maze, side by side, we had a 3D maze platform. They can go to 3D maze platform and check their answers, outcome. So that's how, when they came to know that the answers of the ChatGPT is not really working, some of the students. So I'll show you some more. So actually, we collected all this data, and we are using this students' experience data, and we have a IRB approval. This is a study. And for this entire study, we created, these are the research questions. We created a lot of research questions. But as I mentioned, this is this ChatGPT we implemented in this semester. Just 2 weeks back, we completed this. And we are still in the process of collecting the consent from the student to use their data. But we received some positive response from the students, the consent. So based on those consent data, we have analyzed the preliminary things. But these are the 4 research questions we have in our study. And definitely we will be answering all these, trying to answer these research questions as the next semester data is available. But for the preliminary analysis purpose, we created our research question, preliminary research questions. Now we tried this much, like whether how much human AI collaboration types and student interaction experiences we can see when we use this GPT to design and solve the problem. Like human AI collaboration means who contributed more there, whether the students or the ChatGPT. And the students' interaction experience, whether they felt positive, negative, or mixed. Then we are checking on this, how this human AI collaboration types and the student interaction experiences and sense of positive and negative agency predict your collaborative problem solving. Sense of your agency is nothing but like when you do some task, how the student felt, whether they felt they were leading the task or they felt ChatGPT was leading the task. So that's the sense of agency. And we used some scale for that to predict the sense of positive and the negative agency. And these are the 4 predictors we use to predict collaborative problem solving the task. And if you observe here, we got out of 3,000 students, we are in this stage now, since it is only 2 weeks now after this tutorial ended. And we got 254 consent forms. But in that, one student said no, and 253 agreed to participate. So we used those students' data to come up with our preliminary results to check whether these 2 research, whether we can achieve these 2 research questions first. Once we achieve this, I think as the semester goes, next semester, then we can go back and complete our other 5 research questions in place. So if you observe here, this is the response, actually students' response we received for our research question 1. And this is about the human AI collaboration types. And we asked the students whether you felt equal contribution, both of you, or whether you felt you led the task, or you felt the GPT was leading. So you can see there, I think, please excuse if the grammatical errors are there, because I just took it from there, the responses. So you can see in the responses, if you observe the equal contribution, some students say, I think both me and GPT equally contributed to the design of the maze. And because I do the instructing and GPT did all the other tasks. So some of the other contribution you can see. Let me read some human. Some student felt that the GPT is not really helpful in designing the maze. The answers that GPT gave me were not satisfying. My group and I decided to design the maze by ourselves. And I felt that contribute more than GPT because GPT did not interpret my command correctly. So this is one of the experience that is true. And eventually all the maze ideas are purely mine. GPT creates not a even single idea in my experience regarding to the maze design. And if you see GPT leads, I think these kind of students told we couldn't create, and GPT created a nicer maze and all that part. And if you see in the next set of responses, which were the student response for interaction experiences, positive and the negative experiences. And so the student mentioned it was fun to see how the AI generated mazes and tried to provide solutions, all those things. And if you observe the negative feedback, the negative response, I find GPT always generate one glance can solve type of mazes instead of more challenging mazes. So that is true. If you ask the GPT to give some challenging mazes, whatever prompt you give, the GPT was giving a simple maze, actually, which I think if you write some Python code within 4 or 5 lines, you can solve it. So if I type instructors to increase the difficulty level, it will generate an unsolvable one. So that's the experience the student felt. And I felt that the lack of support for maze design to be very frustrating, as whatever we tried to generate ended up being unsolvable. Yes, I have seen this one in my tutorial, if you ask me. One student asked the ChatGPT to solve the maze using the code algorithm. So because we apply some of the computational thinking steps there. So they asked the ChatGPT, okay, can you use the algorithm to give the solution for this maze? And it gave, I think, a 1 or 2 page Python code. Then that student gave up there itself because that student is from Shape. The student doesn't know Python. So this is how the experience is from the students. And this is a very preliminary results. I think we have a lot of results to collect. And I think that will give us the clear idea how the students are feeling, how the students are using on this ChatGPT. So let me show you some the final results, what we plotted for this the preliminary data. If you observe in this chart, I think majority of the students, 45% of the students told the collaboration GPT as a supporting document in their, because they led the task. They are leading the task, but GPT they used as a collaborative tool in their design and solving the task. And 35% they mentioned equal contribution between the two things, human and the ChatGPT, suggesting some synergistic approach where students and GPT contributed comparably to the task. And they tell merging these two definitely will increase human creativity with the AI computational efficiency. So their comment is on that. Then the very little, the percentage, 20% of cases where they mention GPT to cover their the creation and solving task. And they told the GPT was way higher in capability to create a good maze. So this is some preliminary results what we are getting. So if you observe, 45% tells that we should work together. Then let me show you another one where their interaction experiences they are telling. If you observe, slightly majority students, like 41%, showed a mixed response. They suggested encountered they tell beneficial and challenging aspect when we use GPT, and they tell it has a advantage, capability also, and some limitations also. So they are telling some mixed response in this. And the positive and negative almost very close. It is 30% and 29%. And 30% student experienced a positive feeling when they used this ChatGPT, and they had some satisfactory results. Then 29% students were not favor of this. They felt taken aback for this using ChatGPT for some of the tutorial tasks. So last result, we did some correlation of all these data, and we used 4 predictors: the human AI collaboration types, interaction experiences, and collaborative problem solving. Then the sense of positive agency and negative agency, as I told, who is leading it. And if you observe, and not very, I can say very high correlation or something, but statistically significant, moderate correlation we obtained now for the available data. And if you see in our table, interaction experiences in the column 2, if you see, significantly positive with the sense of positive agency. So that indicates that more positive interaction experiences are related to stronger sense of positive agents. Means if you are leading the task, definitely you are feeling positive, correct? So that showed the correlation there. So if you are leading the task there, that is sense of positive agency, and it correlated positively with the interaction experiences, positive experiences. So we have tried different way here, and the analysis is in progress. As I told, we are waiting for the consent now to do some high-end our analysis, and the simple regression is in place already to predict the collaborative problem solving part using all the predictors here. And this is one data we collected, and as ongoing further data we are collecting on as just to check how the students are feeling, the positive and negative impacts of using this generative AI in their the studies. And we had a debate, and we collected a lot of data on this debate, whether they agree, whether this generative AI or AI is doing good to them or is it harming them. So, and we are collecting some reflections. We have collected already the reflections questions related to some AI ethics and governance based, all those things. This data is already there in our database, but yet to be used for analysis. And we are in the process of collecting the consent from the students. So I think that's all from my side. I leave it to you for any questions.
Thanks so much, Vidya. Unfortunately, we are not going to have time for a live Q&A, so I would encourage anyone who has questions to please address your questions to Vidya in the chat, and maybe she can respond there. Sorry, Vidya, I hope this is okay.
No problem. It's okay.
Yeah, because the last speaker has 15 minutes now for inclusive of Q&A. So hopefully you can take some questions in the chat if there are any. Now, thank you so much. Now, if there's nothing else, I will move to the last speaker, Yann from NIE. Disappointingly, the cat is nowhere in sight, but never mind, I'll deal with it. All right. Shiou, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, unfortunately, my cat cannot join us because he's still taking his cat nap. He takes a very long nap. So I will try to finish within 10 minutes so that I can have time for any questions if you like. And I think also if there are any general questions that you'd like to ask to everyone, I think this is also a good opportunity. So unlike the previous two speakers, I don't have any very elaborate generative AI implementation to share. So what I'm sharing with you is really very modest kind of modifications that I did to part of my course. So it's not a very systemic kind of approach in terms of the inclusion of ChatGPT, but I wanted to present to you some of the ideas that were incorporated or I tried to incorporate into my classroom. And from the perspective of science education, because so I'm from NIE, and so the focus of my presentation will be slightly different because I actually teach pre-service teachers to teach physics in the secondary classroom. So it is not they're not learning physics per se at the undergraduate level. They all have some form of qualification that qualifies them to be ready to teach physics. But what they come to my classes would be to learn to teach physics to secondary students. So it's very education focused. But I think that some of the ideas that I share hopefully will be also useful to you. And so the way that I incorporated the use of ChatGPT in my class was to really purpose it as learning to ask questions or learning to ask good questions using ChatGPT. And so there were three aspects that were modified and I managed to do all this modification within one lesson. But of course, I think the plan moving forward is to expand the use of ChatGPT where relevant. So I think like what Anders had highlighted also to think about how can we incorporate the use of ChatGPT in a meaningful way that will really get students to be more engaged with the critical reasoning that is really essential for future learning. And I think it's really especially important for my students because they will be teaching future students. So that's something that's really important. If we want students to be more critically thinking, then I think it really starts with training the teachers to also engage in critical thinking. So there are three aspects of activities that were incorporating ChatGPT, and hopefully we'll have time to go through each of them very quickly. So in case you're wondering why asking questions, well, the opportunity arose because in our science education courses, we actually also looked at, in terms of Singapore science education landscape, what is really prominent and important currently. And with a recent change in the science education framework from the Ministry of Education, which there is now an emphasis on what we call the practices of science. And part of the practices of science includes ways of understanding the ways of thinking and doing in science. And lo and behold, posing questions and defining problems is one of these important ways of thinking and doing in science. In other words, this is actually this framework actually tries to incorporate the various aspects that are important for scientists in thinking and doing in science, in addition to the more traditional learning of conceptual knowledge in science. So the context of where this lesson occurred is that it was in one of the physics teaching methods course. Interestingly, the title is Innovating Physics Teaching and Learning, which makes it really broad, and it means anything that's kind of innovative can be incorporated, which makes it a great context to talk about ChatGPT, because at the point where the course was running this semester, there was a lot of hype about ChatGPT use. There were a lot of guidelines that were actually implemented or put forward by the Ministry of Education in terms of how teachers should engage students with the use of ChatGPT, what are the best practices, and so on and so forth. So it was a very timely introduction, I would say, a very basic introduction for the pre-service teachers, at least to get them aware and talking about the possible inclusion of ChatGPT in their future classrooms. So I have a very small cohort of students. There are only 19 pre-service teachers. And as I mentioned, these are these are teachers who have been assigned to teach physics, either as a first or second teaching subject when they graduate. So they could typically end up teaching in a secondary school or a junior college. And the lesson, the focus for this 3-hour session was really focused on asking good questions as a physics teacher. And previously, so prior to this lesson, I have introduced what is called the epistemically responsive science teaching questions. So this is actually a set of 3 C questions, and I can elaborate a little bit more if you're interested. So in essence, the teachers my student teachers were supposed to have been introduced to these 3 types of 3 C questions that they were supposed to ask as part of their classroom dialogue. And so what how I utilized ChatGPT was, I was able to use it to actually generate hypothetical classroom talk around various physics topics. So what was really helpful for me as an instructor was that instead of having to come up with very many different types of scenarios of classroom talk that I could utilize for students to critique, I could just generate using ChatGPT 3.5. I try to always use the free version because my goal is always to think about what are the affordances of freely available tools that teachers could use in their classroom, and therefore students could also use in their classroom. So I try to see, what's the limit in that sense in terms of the freely available technology. So I would be able to, for example, type in a very simple prompt to ask ChatGPT to generate classroom talk between teacher and a number of middle school students. Then I will specify the kind of topic, and then some description of the level of students' understanding. And then I would ask it to include certain questions. And so the 3 C questions are questions that involve checking for clarity, consistency, and causality. Now, of course, ChatGPT does not necessarily know what these kinds of questions are, but that didn't matter. And that was actually quite important, or that was actually a good flaw on ChatGPT's part, because then my task was really to get my student teachers to work collaboratively in groups to evaluate the hypothetical classroom talk. So on the left-hand side in blue, that is actually the prompt that I gave to my students. So that was their task. So they were given the classroom conversation, part of a segment of the classroom conversations on the right-hand side that actually shows how the students work collaboratively to annotate on the hypothetical classroom talk in their groups. So their task was they were supposed to identify instances in this hypothetical classroom talk that correspond to the 3 C questioning, which they had learned about previously. So this was really applying their understanding of the 3 C questioning in the context of a hypothetical classroom talk. So the students had to mark out which were the parts of the questions that were seeking clarity, consistency, or causality, and they had to justify why they think this question was aimed at clarifying, looking for consistency in students' responses, or asking for cause and effect, or reasoning to support claims. And then they had to highlight what was one good, one problematic, and one interesting point about the conversation that they noticed. So this is more open-ended. And it was really interesting because different groups actually noticed different aspects that were considered good or problematic. And that really engaged the class in a very active and engaged discussion, which was really great. And that was really the goal of the lesson. And of course, they also had to suggest how the teacher's questioning in this hypothetical classroom talk could be improved to lead to better student understanding about the topic at hand. So again, all of these tasks that the students had to work collaboratively were very situated in the actual classroom practice that they will have to engage in when they go to the classrooms. So as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, you see how the students actually made use of a Google document to mark out, annotate, right, which were the comments they had, which were the questions, and so on and so forth. So each of the group actually had their own Google document. And at the end of their work, gave them some time to work on it. They had a class discussion. So this was when students have different ideas about what counts as a clarifying question or a consistency question, we could actually negotiate to come to a better understanding. So I think that was something that was really useful and something that I would probably want to continue doing. I would also want to put in the qualifier that this is not the first time the students critique work. It's just that in the past, I would usually have to give them some work that I prepare. But now with the use of ChatGPT, I was able to make this a little bit easier for myself as an instructor, so I could generate different kinds of classroom talk if I wanted to for further practice as well. So another aspect that was really interesting was that and this is a really a chance thing. So one of the students from my course actually was interested to do a short independent research during his vacation. I mean, how often do you get students volunteering to do independent research? So I was like, okay, great opportunity. So what I did was I actually had 2 online meetings with this student, and the meetings were quite extensive because we actually took the opportunities to explore possible questions he would like to work on based on his area of interest. And of course, my area of interest was to think about how generative AI could be potentially useful for secondary education, especially to support science teachers in their teaching. And so after some discussion, I think I managed to convince him that one of the aspects I would like him to also look at would be what makes a good prompt within ChatGPT. And so for those of you who are aware, this would actually be related to the idea of prompt engineering, which generates lots of money, to be fair. But what I really wanted my student who was doing this independent research to be able to do was to, through his own experience of generating lots of different prompts to get the ChatGPT to, for example, write a good lesson plan, come up with characteristics of good prompts and characteristics of less productive prompts. And so it is really through this experiential learning that he is able to synthesize, basic guidelines for what makes a good prompts for generating lesson plans and what are less productive prompts. And then he was able to share that with the classmates, and I thought that it was much more meaningful. I could have done that on my as an instructor, but I think that coming from the student and sharing that to his peers made it more impactful for the students as well. So very quickly on the right-hand side is just an outline of what this student's independent research delved into. So he looked at some possible practical applications. He looked at some prompt engineering, as I mentioned. What are some of the limitations he noticed when he asked ChatGPT to, generate certain outcomes? And what are some possible future prospects that ChatGPT could be used for science teachers? And I think one of the very interesting aspects that he mentioned, which prompted a lot of discussion in class, was the idea of using ChatGPT to do auto marking of open-ended question responses. So this is actually not new. It is actually possible to do so already, but I think that not many of my students were very aware of the capability of generative AI to do this marking of open-ended responses. But I think there was also a lot of discussion about the ethics involved, as well as concerns for reliability and validity issues that could be tied in, especially with high-stake examinations. So through my students sharing based on his individual research, which covered many different aspects related to science education, teaching of science in the classrooms, I was actually able to understand what were some of the key ideas that students were interested in. So I thought that was something that allowed me to think about what might be future topics that I could incorporate into the classroom. And finally, I also want to mention that I did also try to highlight to the students that despite the good that ChatGPT could do, because the generative AI does depend on certain aspects of training data, for example. So, they have to be very careful about the biases that could be inherent in the outputs of ChatGPT. And I also wanted to make clear to them that the onus is always on them when they use any of the output that ChatGPT generates, because ultimately, even if they choose to use that as part of their assignments, where it is permitted based on the instructor's instructions, they are still the persons whose names is on the assignment. So they have to take ownership and responsibility for the accuracy of all the information that is generated in their assignment. And therefore, it was something important that they have to take note of. And I think on that note, I will stop my sharing and take any questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yann. Are there any questions? We're almost out of time, but if there are any questions, please do drop them in the chat, or you can feel free to speak out. I'm not sure. We have about 0 minutes left. But if there are any questions, please, it doesn't look like anything's coming forward at this point. So while people are thinking, if anyone is thinking of questions, I will just say very special thanks to all the speakers who took time out of this very busy period of the semester to be willing to share during the session. Really appreciate the sharing, and to everyone who showed up to listen and attend this webinar. If there are no questions for Yuan Shou, I think I'm just going to conclude the session. Please do offer your feedback through the evaluation form that Tashini has shared in the chat. If you go to the link that she shared at the beginning of the webinar, that will take you to the repository with all the CTLP webinar recordings. You can, binge watch the whole season of AI videos and webinars and, share it with your friends and family. So if there's nothing else, I'm just going to say thanks everyone for coming to this webinar and really appreciate you all being here. Thank you.